Hello, this is Jeff Schott speaking.
Hi, this is Jessie with Caixin Media. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
Thank you very much for accepting my interview request. I really appreciate it. So as I wrote in the email, I'm writing a story about the U.S.-China trade tensions, and we kind of want to find out how to solve the problem. So I have some questions for you.
Okay.
So I just get started. Okay. So
Sure.
my first question is about. Just feel free to ask me to repeat my question again if you don't hear it clearly. Okay. So my first question is about. I want to know. I know the meaning of the 301 investigation, but I'm still curious about what are some considerations behind Trump's decision to use the 301 investigation this time. Why didn't he resort to the WTO system or other multilateral framework?
Very simple. Because many of the trade practices cited in the investigation are not covered by WTO obligations.
Yeah. So I want to know. But does the initiation of the 301 investigation itself violates WTO rules?
No, the invocation of the investigation does not violate anything. It is a fact-finding exercise and fully consistent with U.S. obligations. In fact, it's the way U.S. would prepare for WTO litigation in cases where there is an alleged WTO violation by a trading partner. And in fact, in this case, one aspect of the practices cited in the investigation was found to violate a WTO obligation with regard to licensing practices on foreign investment. And the United States has begun procedures in the WTO to bring a case against China on that specific practice.
Yes, but I want to know the whole process, the initiation of 301 investigation. It didn't violate WTO rules because in the last century, I think WTO rules that the U.S. shouldn't use the
No, there's nothing that says U.S. shouldn't use a WTO as long as it is consistent with U.S. obligations in the WTO. It shouldn't use the 301. And for most disputes involving WTO obligations, the United States has pursued its domestic processes to prepare a case that is then litigated in the WTO. But you cannot litigate in the WTO a dispute that does not involve WTO obligations, and that's the problem.
Okay, yeah, I got your point. So, as you just mentioned, there are 4 allegations made by the 301 investigation, and one of I think it's about the license issue. The U.S. has filed for WTO complaint, but I also want to know among the 4 allegations, which ones do fall into the jurisdiction of the WTO, which one doesn't?
All the others don't.
Yeah. So okay. So how about the 3 other issues? What's the best way, do you think, to solve the problems? Through the negotiation or like by other multilateral negotiations or just between US and China?
Well, in the past, it would have made more sense to have a multilateral negotiation and have much more detailed rules on foreign investment. But developing countries kicked investment issues off of the Doha Round agenda at the Cancun Ministerial in September of 2003. So the possible solutions to these problems through new WTO rules were basically blocked almost 15 years ago, and taken off the WTO negotiating agenda. Now, bilaterally, we could have made more progress in the bilateral investment treaty negotiations, but those negotiations, while making making progress, did not go far enough or fast enough to have a successful resolution. And that whole process has been stalled since the election of President Trump, and indeed policies in China have moved backwards since then and have become more restrictive. And the problems decided, both with regard to technology transfer and with regard to cyber issues, have become more difficult because of these deepening problems.
Yeah. Especially about the third one, according to the USTR, it says China directs and facilitates the systematic investment and acquisition of U.S. companies and assets by Chinese companies. So, and also the U.S. complains a lot about the Made in China 2025. One of the reasons for its complaint is because Chinese government is involved in the plan. So I want to know, but in other words,
well, no, it's not because Chinese government is involved in the plan. It's because there is discrimination built into the plan that disadvantages foreign companies doing business in China.
You mean the Made in China 2025, or China directs the acquisition of U.S. companies? Which one do you refer?
The China 2025. The acquisition of U.S. companies, that is subject to CFIUS review if it involves a national security concern, and we are having more extensive CFIUS reviews of foreign investment in the United States by China and other countries, and there's legislation before the Congress that would greatly expand the authorities to screen those types of foreign investments. But so that's something that's being worked on, whether there was a 301 case or not.
Okay, so speaking of the Made in China 2025, I want to know why the U.S. is so concerned about the program, because to some extent, from the Chinese government's perspective, it's just like a state's objective or even wishful thinking. So I want to know why U.S. is very concerned about the plan.
Well, I mean, it is industrial policy, which every country does.
Yeah.
But that's your point. But it's the resources being devoted to it, and it is the discrimination against foreign companies trying to compete against Chinese national champions that is causing the concern.
You mentioned the discrimination. So can you be more specific in the Made in China 2025?
I don't know what you mean.
Because you mean why the U.S. the reason U.S. is worried about the Made in China 2025 is because it's discriminatory policies. So can you be more specific about that?
Well, it's the combination of both financial assistance available to domestic firms that are not available to others in the economy, as well as the discriminatory investment policies that make it difficult for foreign companies to compete against government-supported domestic companies. Because their ability to contest in the Chinese market is limited by these practices.
So is
not
it
the 2025 practices, but by the discriminatory foreign investment restrictions.
Yeah, I got your point. But I want to know, just as you mentioned, other countries, they also have their manufacturing plans. So I want to know where are the boundary between government and the market in this process? Like in some area, Chinese government can show some support, but in some area it cannot. So I want to know what are the boundaries.
Well, that's a very good question. That doesn't have an answer.
Because if you wanna make changes for the Chinese government, they need to know what's wrong with the program first. So I was a little bit confused.
Well, no, I mean, the U.S. government has said for a long time in the bilateral investment treaty negotiations what they find wrong with, or what they find troubling with Chinese policy. So that's not the issue. The issue is there isn't a clear, bright line between what governments can do in terms of industrial policy that is consistent with their obligations, and what types of actions go too far. And that's in part what this dispute is about.
Yeah. So the disputes, and also because there are like no rules to say whether there is no black or white. So
there are no WTO rules.
Yeah,
no.
yeah. So is that the reason why Trump complains that China is taking advantage of the WTO or other trade deals? What's your view on it?
No, I don't think that type of comment has anything to do with that. I think it's much more simplistic about the differential tariff rates.
Differential tariff rates. Okay, It's about that rule. So it's only about that? Or
no, I didn't say that, but that's
the major reason.
You can look at it in a more simplistic fashion, and that certainly is the headline for him.
Okay. And my other question is about from the tariff perspective. So first, I want to do in your
from what perspective?
Tariff.
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
Oh, so in terms of the tariff, the
tariff. Okay,
yeah, tariff. Yeah. So first, I want to know: do you think what are the core issue of the China-U.S. trade tension this time? What are some core issues, or the key points?
What do you mean core issues? The tariffs have nothing to do with the problems. They're potential punishment.
But the President Trump complains a lot about the huge trade gap between China and the U.S. Is that right? So I want to know. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
So about the huge trade gap between China and the U.S., I want to know from your perspective, do you think what causes the huge trade gap between the two countries? And is it possible for China to cut 100 billion trade surplus with the U.S.?
I think that's an irrelevant. It is not an economically meaningful action. For either country, and the deficit that we should be worried about is our global deficit, and that can only be changed by changes in foreign trade practices and U.S. macroeconomic policies.
But
as long as we continue to consume much more than we produce, then we're going to have a trade deficit.
Okay, so do you think what's the ultimate goal of Trump's administration in terms of the recent Sino-U.S. trade tension? Is it about the industrial policy, or is it about the trade gap, or like kind of both?
All of the above. Different people have different objectives. There are different objectives for domestic political reasons, and different objectives for short-term economic reasons, and different objectives for long-term economic reasons.
Yeah. So I'm not sure whether you watched or read the news about President Xi's speech yesterday, and have you paid any attention to it?
Why would I pay attention to it? It's happened 8,000 miles away.
I mean,
no, I'm joking.
Yeah,
I'm joking. My colleague Nick Lardy was present at the speech.
Oh. So, do you have any view about China's promise of the opening policies? It's like just a cliche, or just do you think it can make some real difference?
I think Chinese reforms are necessary and would be very helpful for growth of the Chinese economy. I think the new economic leadership of the Chinese government is intent on reviving and strengthening some of the reforms that had started years ago and had slowed down. And I think the sooner that can be done and implemented broadly across the economy, the better it will be for China and for its trading partners.
Yeah, just as Trump just tweeted about the President Xi's speech yesterday, do you think the both sides can make concessions, or where will the trade tension lead to in the next few weeks?
Well, I think there's an interest on both sides to try to contain the dispute, to make sure that it does not have exaggerated importance in our overall relationship and its consequences for our dealings with other problems in the region, particularly North Korea. So there are a lot of things that the United States and China have to do together and cooperate together to achieve success. And so we do have very serious economic trade and investment problems, and we need to work very diligently to resolve them and to rebuild trust that the solutions will be forthcoming in a timely manner. And so some short-term actions could be useful for trust building. Once you have restored more trust, then you can move from the short-term actions to the more sustained reforms that are needed over the medium to long term to really ensure that we have a healthy economic relationship.
Okay, I think that's all the questions I want you to ask. Is there anything you want to add, or something you think is important for me to know?
I think the last 5 minutes was the more important.
Okay.
Or the last 2 minutes were the more important comments.
Okay, thank you very much. If I have any follow-up questions, can I send the questions to you by email?
You can, but it's a very busy week, so I'm traveling again starting on Thursday. So I'll do the best I can.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for your time.
Okay, you're welcome. Right.
Bye.
Bye-bye.